There are 5 people considered missing in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park: Dennis Martin, Trenny Gibson, Thelma Melton, Christopher Cessna, and Derek Leuking. They're the only missing people in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park who have never been found. First, we'll talk about Dennis Lloyd Martin. On Father's Day, June 14th, 1969, 7-year-old Dennis Martin disappeared forever. He had hiked up to the Spencefield area of the national park with his father, grandfather, and older brother. While at Spencefield, Dennis, his older brother, and 2 other boys on the trip decided it would be fun to try to sneak around the adults and scare them from the woods. Dennis split off from the other boys to take a different route to prank the adults. Once he split up, he was never seen again. Dennis's father had only lost sight of his son for a few minutes, but never could find him, despite hiking miles just after the incident, with hopes of finding him wandering out in the woods. The search for Dennis consisted of the largest search party the Great Smoky Mountains National Park had ever seen. But that was a bad thing. A poorly run investigation combined with little evidence to go on left everyone puzzled as to where Dennis had gone. To this day, Dennis Martin is still missing. It has been over 53 years. Rangers believe he died of exposure shortly after getting lost, while Dennis's family believes he was kidnapped and taken out of the park. Next is Trenny Gibson. On October 8th, 1976, Teresa Trenny Gibson went on a hike with a group of about 40 students from Bearden High School. Trenny was a 16-year-old sophomore at the time. Around noon, a bus carrying the Bearden students stopped in the Clingman's Dome parking lot. Their teacher told them their assignment was to hike to Andrews Bald and back to the bus. On the way, they were supposed to observe plants, trees, and the general ecosystem they found themselves in. The group was hiking back from Andrews Bald to the Clingman's Dome parking lot when the group discovered she was missing. Accounts of how Trenny had disappeared varied, but the general story was that she left Andrews Bald by herself and headed back to the bus. She overtook a group of slower students on the way, and then declined to join the next group of students she saw resting on the trail. As she walked further down the trail, someone spotted her stopped and crouching on the trail. She was looking off the trail to the right. After that, she was never seen again. A wide search was started to find Trenny. As is often the case in the mountains, fog and rain settled in that night she disappeared, so it was difficult for searchers. Along the trail, cigarette butts and a can of beer were found next to where Trenny disappeared. While Trenny nor any evidence of her was ever found, her belongings began turning up randomly during the search. The hair comb she always had on her person was found on another student she was with that day. Trenny's jewelry showed up in the possession of a Bearden classmate who refused to say how she had come upon it. The search ended at the beginning of November with no real evidence of what had ever happened to Trenny. Our next missing person is Thelma Pauline Melton. On September 25th, 1981, Thelma Melton would disappear while hiking in the Deep Creek area of the national park. Melton and a couple of her friends decided they would hike toward Deep Creek Trail, a place Melton was not only familiar with, but had visited dozens of times throughout her life. On their way back to the campsite, Melton reportedly increased her speed and left her friends in the dust. The last they saw of her was when she crossed a hill out of their view. When everyone got back to the campsite, Melton's husband, who didn't hike with them that day, said she never came back. She was reported missing at about 6 o'clock in the evening, and there were a couple hundred people and plenty of dogs that began searching for her. The only potential evidence they found of Melton was when the dogs alerted to a downed tree, perhaps where Melton decided to rest for a minute. There were a couple of peculiar instances during this investigation. Apparently, the next year, a check written to Melton was cashed in Alabama, but nothing ever came from it. Also, Melton had been suffering from depression, and her husband's bottle of Valium had been stolen from him at some point during the trip. There was no actual evidence that Melton herself took the pills, but it seemed strange at the time. Nonetheless, Melton was never found. Next is Christopher Lee Cessna. Christopher Lee Cessna was 45 years old from Cary, North Carolina, and he was reporting missing on April 27, 2011. Rangers found Cessna's 2009 Audi in the Newfound Gap parking lot, but there was no other evidence to further the search, so nothing ever came of it. That's all that was ever known, was that his car was found. Other than that, he's still missing to this day. Finally is Derek Leuking. He was a 23-year-old who was last seen leaving a hotel in Cherokee, North Carolina on March 3rd, 2012. His car was found in the lower lot of the Newfound Gap parking area. Derek's family were actually the ones who found his car, and when they did, they found lots of brand new survival gear, Derek's wallet, cash, and a note that said, quote, "Don't try to follow me." According to Derek's father, he noticed his son change recently. He began drinking and smoking cigarettes, which was unusual for him. Even so, his family didn't think he was suicidal. The search for Derek included 60 people and 3 dog teams. On the day Derek disappeared, no one had seen him in the park, even though there were tons of people around at the time. The park was busy that day. This led searchers to believe he immediately went off the trail whenever he entered the woods. No evidence of Derek was ever found, and he also is still missing to this day.